This is Co-op HD1 HD3 Hornsby, radio for people, not for profit. Welcome to Volumes, the Austin Public Library radio show. Each week, we explore how your library is more than books. The library is knowledge, technology, and inspiration for our community.
And this is DJ Harris here with Volumes, the Austin Public Library radio show. Welcome to the show and Happy New Year, everyone. We have a special show for you all today. We've got something from our podcast archive. We're going to listen to Thor Harris as he chats with the Austin Public Library about his rich musical career, working with his hands, and successfully dealing with depression. Thor has played with the Swans, the Angels of Light, Gretchen Phillips, and many, many more. We will hear Thor Harris right now here on Volumes, the Austin Public Library radio show.
So I'm sitting here with Thor Harris. He's a musician, local Austin guy, plays with the Swans, Bill Callahan, Gretchen Phillips, many others. Very cool guy. Thanks for coming out, Thor.
Sure.
Tell us some of those stories of how you've linked up with a lot of these guys.
Yeah, professional stalking. And to get in Swans, it was the mid-90s, and I at least didn't have an email address yet. I sent them a postcard to their mailing address, which I don't know how I got that. Maybe they had I think Young God Records had a mail order thing, and I just sent them a postcard saying that I thought they were great, and if they ever needed a drummer to let me know. And then I met them on tour. They were playing a freezing cold show at Emo's outside, and this was the Swans' final tour in 1996 or 7 or something. It was a really good show. And then we met at that show and liked each other. And then I recorded on the first Angels of Light record, like maybe a year later or something. And then with Bill Callahan, I found out that this realtor who hung out at my neighborhood bar sometimes had helped him find a house. Thanks again, Mark Levy, for helping me get that note to Bill. So I wrote him a note on a napkin and gave it to that realtor, who then gave it to Bill. Bill contacted me, and the rest is lovely history. Played on a bunch of his records, and we did some tours together. And he lives in town. He's a lovely dude and an amazing songwriter. And then Gretchen Phillips, she was working at Whole Foods, and I saw her band play at this party, and there were like guys in her band wearing these big evening gowns, and I was like, and the band just sounded great. It was sort of like grunge with Casio keyboards in it. This was the 90s. When I saw them, I thought, man, that looks like so much fun. So I told her that I needed to be her next drummer. She was like, why is this straight guy coming and telling me he wants to be in my band? But it worked, and now we're like best friends, and I convinced her to become a woodworker, so we'd have that to bro out about. You know, at the very least, like, you've given someone you admire a really good compliment, and if they probably won't laugh in your face. So I really do recommend it. Just write letters to anybody you want to work with. And another thing now is, like, I think, like, back then I didn't have much of a resume when I started. But now that I have kind of a resume, I do it just because I think that, I mean, I've played with a lot of people, and I think that people think I'm either too expensive or too busy, but I'm always looking for new people to play with, and so it's good to just walk up and tell them. I did say that to Rufus Wainwright, but then I never got the call. And I sent a letter to Willie Nelson, and I got an email back from his sister saying, thanks for your interest.
That's funny.
Yeah, it works.
That's cool. Some people are motivated to really dig into one subject and just explore it till it's completely done. Like I think of, we're in the library, I think of like James Joyce, he just dug into Dublin and that was enough for him. And other people, like I see you exploring all these different sounds and bands and different expressions of music. What do you think drives you to be someone like that who's constantly looking to do something new or work with new people?
As I get older, I've kind of learned that different musicians like kind of different things about music. I didn't really listen to lyrics. I didn't know what a good song was until I was in my 20s. Mm-hmm. I've always been more fascinated with sounds and combinations of sounds. I mean, music is, although I love Leonard Cohen now, I love a great songwriter, and I think in a kind of mystical way understand what good songs are. Although I don't write songs in that sense, I don't write lyrics. The music I make is like instrumental ambient music. Like I'm more attuned to, especially rhythm, because my first instrument was drums. Now I play a bunch of other instruments. I just loved the sounds of them, and I wanted to be able to play at least simple parts on them. Mm-hmm. But I always like. I know that I have musicians who are friends of mine who say they don't mind working in tried and true forms of music, like Dixieland jazz, or something where there's rules, there's a sound, a specific sound that's already established. There's been thousands of compositions recorded in this style. I love to listen to that stuff, but I always want to find some new sound or some new combination of sounds, something that sounds fresh to my ear. That's kind of what drives me.
So when you are linking up with new people working on new kinds of music, how is it for you to fit into someone who already has an established way of working?
I think everyone in the world, when I go and meet with some hero of mine, in London or some faraway place where I don't feel at home, I always have this moment of anxiety where I think, wow, what if they notice I'm just this dork from coastal Texas who was a bad classical music student, and there is my friend John Congleton produces a lot of records, and so he sort of has to become a family member with these bands, and that only lasts a few weeks, however long it takes to make a record, maybe a week, and then that's over. I probably don't say this enough, like whatever skills you have for making people feel comfortable around you and feel, I don't front. I wish I knew a better way of saying that, but just everybody has insecurities about their own playing, their own abilities. We all have like weaknesses, but whatever you can do to make who you're working with, whatever I can do to make who I'm working with feel like I can do a good job of this, but I'm not like arrogant or it's sort of just a matter of in some cases like fitting into somebody else's family when you come in as a side person to play on a record or do a tour. But it's pretty cool, most musicians are pretty awesome people, I have to say.
So your music, you said you play this instrumental and you kind of have this experimental sound, or maybe that's what you're drawn to at times. And Austin definitely has this tradition of more Americana roots, singer-songwriter thing going on. How amenable is this music community to the kind of music that you like to make and play?
That's a great question. I've been here since 1985, and me and Craig Ross started this weirdo band in 87, I think, called Stick People. And it was like a weird, sort of angular punk, funk, new wave band with this great singer, Malford Milligan. He's like a 6.5 foot tall, beautiful black albino with like a soul singer voice that's just otherworldly. And, there was a small audience for what we were doing. I thought we were the best band in town at the time, and I think we were really good. But nowadays, with way more people in town, you're right, that singer-songwriter and that blues rock thing, Stevie Ray Vaughan had just toured with David Bowie and gotten huge, so that drew a lot of attention to Austin being this electric blues rock capital, which I was never interested in playing that kind of music. Nowadays, if there's some good things to be said about the growth, there's more people here, more different kinds of musicians and more different kinds of music listeners. I think there's a lot of good things to be said about the growth. I think if it was still the little town that I moved to in 1985, I might be a little bored with it by now. I think that individuals change more than the spirit of a town changes. I think Austin still is full of brilliant people passionate about what they do, just like in the film Slacker.
You're listening to Volumes, the Austin Public Library radio show on Co-op 91.7 FM and KOOP.org. Radio for people, not for profit.
Hey there, Austin. Teen Program Specialist Michael Harley from the Downtown Central Library here. Ever seen a chessboard and wondered exactly what all of those pieces are? Ever been curious about their weirdly specific movements? Ever wanted to know some of those special plays that catch your opponent in checkmate? On Wednesday, December 27th from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m., Chess Club is meeting at the Willie Mae Kirk branch, where teens and adults can hone their chess playing skills with other players. Chess players of all skill levels are invited. More details for these and additional programs can be found at library.austintexas.gov/events.
This is Ann Minner, Managing Librarian at the Old Quarry Branch. I get to highlight some information for children this week. A great resolution for the new year is to read aloud more often. Families that read together have more interesting discussions because reading aloud to children introduces them to words they don't use every day. How often do suspenders, meerkats, or tap dancing come up in regular conversation? Reading aloud is the single most important activity leading to language development. It's a fun and easy way to expand vocabulary. Reading aloud also models expressive voice, which helps illustrate the use of punctuation and is a great public speaking skill. Reading aloud gives children the opportunity to practice their listening skills, and it builds motivation, curiosity, and memory. And the best part, reading aloud is fun. It's time well spent together, laughing, talking, and enjoying books. And this helps form a positive association with books and reading later in life. Lots of books for all ages to share can be found at library.austintexas.gov.
Capital Metro invites the public to hear about the proposed transformation of the Austin Region's bus system. For more information, you may visit capmetro.org/June 2018.
You're listening to Volumes, the Austin Public Library radio show on Co-op 91.7 FM and KOOP.org. Radio for people, not for profit.
This is Joe,
Martha,
and Lisa,
co-hosts of Writing on the Air.
do you like to read?
Do you like to write?
We do too, and we love bringing you the best authors and other creative types from Texas and beyond.
Listen to Writing on the Air every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Central Time.
Voted Best Book Discussion in the Austin Chronicle's 2015 Best of Austin.
Wednesday at 6 o'clock p.m.
on 91.7 FM
or KOOP.org.
So I'm sitting here with Thor Harris. He's a musician, local Austin guy, plays with the Swans, Bill Callahan, Gretchen Phillips, many others. So you mentioned liking a variety of musical instruments and different sounds. How do you incorporate that into the projects that you do? are you making instruments that are already in existence? Are you modifying instruments to get a new sound out of them, or something experimental, or are you even coming up with just totally experimental instruments that maybe don't already exist in the world?
Yeah, I am constantly making new instruments, and there's a few that I'm pretty excited about right now that are in the works. Musicians are always looking for a new sound, but if you go into a club on a given night, every musician has about the same tools: a bass, a drum set, and a guitar with a distortion pedal. A quick way to find new sounds is to use old band instruments or modified instruments. And I started modifying instruments when I was about 13 or 14, just because I could afford cheap instruments, but I wanted them to sound better, and I wanted them to sound and look more like expensive instruments. So sometime in my 30s, I think I got this book by Bart Hopkin. It's got a simple name like Building Musical Instruments, and it's just a treasure trove of cool information about building instruments. Most of mine look pretty rough, like this electric viola that I play in Swans just looks like a stick or a baseball bat, but it sounds amazing, through effects and through a bass amp. Because I grew up around tools, and my dad had a machine shop in our house and a wood shop in the garage, it's become a quick, easy way to get something that sounds really unique, something that doesn't sound like it came from Guitar Center.
That's cool. So woodworking and tools and working with your hands is something that you grew up doing, and something you still continue to enjoy. And what does that allow you to express or say that music doesn't?
That's a super good question, and I still don't exactly know. My cousin wrote this book. She's a shrink, and her name is Carrie Barron. She's going to move to town, actually. She lives in New York City right now. She's going to move to town and work at the Dell Medical School. She wrote a book called The Creativity Cure, and I do notice, like if I've been touring for months and months and not really, I bring a sketchbook so I can draw and write stories, but if I don't make anything with my hands for a long time, I don't really feel complete. I also need to play music sometimes to feel complete and get tons of exercise. So, and on the road, you get to do maybe one of those three things. There's some human need. I don't know if it's in all of us. My cousin, the psychiatrist, would suggest that yes, we do need to make things with our hands in order to feel like complete, happy, content people. I know that I always have had that need, and I've always done it. And playing music does not fulfill that whole need. Although it is tactile, there's nothing like making a thing and finishing it and being able to hold it in your hands. Like I built my house, although it just looks like a sort of big unfinished mess to me. I think it's a pretty neat house. People say it is.
I also know that you've been pretty open about talking about depression and knowing that that's a normal thing that people deal with. So what are some tools and things that you have that help you work through that part of your life? And I know music and working with your hands is part of that.
Yeah, I got a serious episode of depression when I was 27, which seems to be an age when a lot of people have a really, like, the worst year of their life, or they die in the case of Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison. Not saying there's anything to this numerology thing, but I too had the worst year of my life then. And for the first couple of years, I was pretty ashamed of it. I didn't want anyone to find out that I was sort of a broken person or that I was taking medication for it, and that shame just felt awful. Then I guess I sort of learned that people had written books about it, and other people had gotten to a place where they felt fine talking about it, and I wanted to get to that place. So I did. I sort of worked on it, and I thought it's also helpful to other people with depression to not to not pretend like I don't have depression, and especially as I became like a pretty high-functioning musician, started touring the world, playing in bands and stuff, so I had somewhat of a public profile. I just, like, the more I opened up about it and talked about it, the more I felt comfortable talking about it. This guy, what's his name, Harry Lynch, just started the Mental Health Channel. This is a guy from Austin, and I think this is one of the greatest things to happen in mental health since the advent of Prozac. The Mental Health Channel is its own channel, and it's going to start doing something with PBS. I don't really understand how that's going to work, but I made a video for the Mental Health Channel. I think it's under the Inside Story. It's a story about major depression. It's only 7 minutes long. Once that video started bouncing around the world, people came up to me after every show and said that they had some experience with depression and that video was important to them. One of the worst things about depression is when you're in the worst of it, you feel so uniquely horrible and just so alone, and like surely nobody has had these kind of awful feelings before, which actually isn't true. It's one thing I did back when I got my diagnosis. Really, I got my pills, and then the doctor said, "Here's some names of some books. You could go to the library and get these books." And I did. I came to this very library and got Kathy Cronkite's book, which was great, and I bought Darkness Visible by William Styron, which is great, and there's a new one called Noonday Demon by Andrew Solomon. That's fantastic. It's not an easy read. It's thick, and he's a real writer. And so is William Styron. Those are great memoirs about depression. But the Mental Health Channel is great because sometimes when you have depression, you can't even concentrate enough to read a book. So it's easy to click on a video and feel some kinship to someone who's been through what you may be going through.
That's cool. Yeah, it's really important, and really happy that it's people like you sharing their stories and wanting to help other people. Last thing I'd like to ask is that you've been involved with the library in several different ways. Why the library? Why the interest in working with us and collaborating? I'm totally a socialist. I might be kind of a communist. I love the idea of like a central place that loans stuff out. I have like an embarrassing collection of tools at my house, woodworking and metalworking, all kinds of tools, and I love to loan them out just because it's just silly. It's like some of them I loaned out a tool yesterday that I certainly have not used in at least a year. I just love the idea that we're a society, a community, and we don't each have to own everything. We can loan stuff to each other. The more sort of interdependent we are, I think the better. And yeah, I just believe that society is way healthier when there's interdependence in things like libraries. And there's something about the library, it makes, like, even when you just step into the library, it just makes you feel like part of society. Here's all this information that is what our society is built of, and the internet is pretty great, but it's also kind of just like a feral wilderness. I love the internet. It's amazing that I can go on the internet and find out how to change the belt in my niece's BMW, because it sure ain't like changing the belt in an old Ford or something. Right. It's kind of rocket science, but I mean that's pretty fantastic. But there's still things that you just can't get from the internet that you can from the public library. And I kind of grew up in public libraries. My dad, we always went to the public library, and there were like these like rock star painters would sometimes come to town and do demonstrations at our libraries. I don't know how
how that worked out, but there was, I remember watching a guy paint a portrait and just kind of talk about how he was doing it at the library. It was pretty great. So just keep libraries alive.
I know a lot of people appreciate the work that you do and the different projects you're involved with. So where can people find your music? Where can people see you perform? You talked about Thor and Friends. Where can we go see Thor?
You know, I am really bad at internet promotion. The one thing I do have is a Twitter account. I do have an Instagram account too. I think it's just Thor Harris, but it might be Thor Harris 666. But on Twitter, I'm certainly Thor Harris 666, and I do talk about upcoming shows on Twitter. Thor and Friends will be playing a lot in Austin this winter. We're gonna make a record. That band sounds a little like Steve Reich, Music for 18 Musicians, and it sounds a little bit like Kraftwerk. And those are my two favorite musics. Steve Reich, the early or mid 20th century minimalist composers, and then early electronic pioneers. Those are huge favorites of mine.
Very cool. Well, that's it from the Austin Library. Thanks again to Thor for coming. He did it twice.
Yeah.
So really appreciate that. And yeah, until next time, we'll talk to you later.
Thanks for listening to Volumes, the Austin Public Library radio show. Special thanks to our producer, DJ Harris, and to the musicians who composed and performed our original theme song, Andrew Noble on violin, Kirk Duvall on guitar, and Mike Wheat on percussion. And thanks to you, our listeners. Volumes, the Austin Public Library radio show, airs Wednesday afternoons at 2:30 on Co-op 91.7 FM and koop.org. If you catch us mid-show, full episodes and other details can be found at library.austintexas.gov/volumes.